Hello and a warm Collisions. Welcome to a returning guest, Mr. Robert Bryce. How you doing, Rob?
Fantastic, Tyler. Great to see you.
Absolutely, man. I was digging back creeping in my own August 2022. You and I chatted, and I don't know. It seems like lifetimes ago. I don't know. So, that crazy thing called COVID was happening last time that you and I chatted. Hopefully, we don't have to talk about that today. But I love the where are we now? Getting a check-in, getting an update. If you haven't listened, go back, dig into the archives on Collisions. But if you have, welcome to episode as the story continues. You are the CEO and the Chief Executive Officer and founder at Bōde Canada. Is it Bōde? I always question myself. Is it Bōde?
It's Bōde.
Okay, perfect.
Nailed it.
Thanks, man. Step one, don't get the name right. Bōde Canada. Who are you guys? What do you do? What's the change you're looking to create in the world? And let's launch off from there.
Yeah, Bōde is really a platform with the goal of modernizing the real estate transaction. So making it very convenient, easy, transparent for buyers and sellers of property who are the decision makers to connect fully online and purchase property. So that was the original vision, was to make that technology available to individual homeowners as well as home builders. When we launched way back in 2020, and which seems like a lifetime ago, or maybe two, and since then we've realized that vision, which has been really exciting. We're now in scale-up mode. We've done almost 1,600 transactions, so almost $1 billion of property has transacted on platform, and that's a healthy blend, I think, of individual homeowners, investors, property flippers, as well as home builders and developers now across Alberta, BC, and Ontario. So we've hit that. It's been a lot of fun, kind of no matter which phase you talk about in a new business. But to me, this is the most fun when you have a lot of happy customers and we're hitting that scale up kind of inflection point in our business, and especially in these market conditions. And yeah, happy to whatever you think makes sense.
Let's get into that. The market. Just curious, 5 years, 2020, you made the comment, which I agree, a couple lifetimes, or however when you want to measure that. How much has the realizing your vision? How much did it change? If I'm an early stage startup and I'm like, I've got to figure it out, and maybe not. I'm gonna encounter customers that maybe want different things. How much has that stayed true or deviated for you guys on the journey?
I think it stayed quite consistent in the fundamental sense. Like we're very much, if you look at the big picture of more people wanting to transact in their life online, whether that's in the broadest definition of e-commerce. People wanting the availability of data, the democratization of, I don't know why I can't say that word, democratization of information and ease of use. That's happening. That has tailwinds across all sectors. We really wanted to bring that experience to this real estate domain, which has been historically mired, of course, in not just one middleman, but multiple middle people in a transaction. Now you have 4 people, you have all the schedules and conflicting, call it resourcing, and all of that happens through a transaction, which has now largely become a digital shopping experience. So I would say the main thing that's happened is the fundamentals of that, of believing that the typical homeowner, typical home builder, and early adopters even of that are really excited about having the availability of that kind of experience. That I think we really nailed. Exactly how we did that, 25 different twists and turns and different roadmap kind of alterations and prioritizing different aspects of our build and execution towards that. And I think you probably, having done almost 500 episodes, you probably talked to I'm sure you haven't talked to a single tech founder that hasn't said, well, that took twice as long and twice as much money to build what we wanted. So I think that's been our main realization, is we have a very clear view of exactly what the customer wants, and we have a very defined path towards that. It's how fast can you do that? How efficient can you do that as a team? And with these capital markets in the broader sense being more constrained right now in the last 2 years with declining venture capital in Canada, you have to do that in a very efficient way because, those $10 million checks don't grow on trees for Canadian companies at this point. So It's now how do you become very thoughtful and efficient in how you deliver on that vision.
Well, even thinking back to our conversation, the problem you're looking to solve or the thing you're looking to do still sounds very consistent. Like from the outside, pretty easy. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna digitize this, we're gonna put it online. But the how and the what and the nuance. Talk to me a little bit about the journey of being a founder, going through some of those different availability of funding cycles, of like people throwing money to what you just said of like very different world. How much did you I guess how quick did you have to pivot your own beliefs of how the world was working from a venture and a capital perspective?
Yeah, I think they completely like August 2022 is when we were last talking. That was near the absolute peak of
Yeah.
multiples and aggressive investment is you'd say in a global sense and a national sense. So the conventional wisdom at that time was I would have conversations with investors when I started talking about prospective probability of profit. Like, why are you using the profit word? This is just about revenue. Don't use profit. And so that was the grow at all costs mentality, which of course, over the last 20 years has been the recipe, the venture recipe of,
Yeah.
throw money at it, grow no matter what. And I would say 2 years later, that is now, you got to double your business in terms of revenue each year. But in order to do an aggressive Series A or B, you need to be profitable and doubling. So that's completely completely changed to where are the efficient businesses that are smart at operating and taking advantage of technology to streamline and keep their cost structures tight. So completely different parameters right now than 2 years ago.
How in that period of time, how much did it impact you guys as an organization? Like if it hadn't changed, we might've been here. A bit hypothetical. It's like crystal ball, but hypothetical, like reverse, but forward at the same time. If that hadn't changed and it would have stayed, would you guys have been in a different place, or was there some good that came out of actually forcing companies to look at things maybe like a more fundamentally based business?
Yeah, I think I'm naturally wired for these market conditions.
Okay.
I don't really unless you can raise so much money that you're kind of on a crazy level of you're raising 50 to 100 million dollars early in your phase and you just buy the market. Unless you can do that, and that doesn't really exist in Canada, it does in pockets in the United States. Then you should be focused on the fundamental aspects of why your proposition works, how you're differentiated, and applying thoughtful operational technology. Like that's a big part of what we were doing in 2022 and 23 was refactoring our platform. So we invested in all the recoding, breaking it out into components. We have all these different features that are now independent and scalable in their own right, securing the platform, everything that went into that investment. It was always the plan to do that and then be more streamlined on the other side of it, because now we don't have to have as big a tech team, as big of investment in that. So everything that we've been doing has been designed to get to a point of scalability where the customer has an amazing experience because the platform is now totally robust and seamless. But at the same time, we've streamlined our internal approach to that. And that's where a company like ours gets really exciting, because the customer doesn't require interacting with us at every step. They've got this great autonomous experience,
which they don't want. They don't want, and you don't want. Like it kind of meets everybody's objective, right?
Exactly. And that intersection of customer experience and our own operational needs to support that, if we can do that with a really easy online experience, that's what makes this business really exciting. But then I would also say in the last year, AI has taken that whole application of our own internal systems to a totally different level. Like the ability, the levels of productivity we can deliver in terms of content, in terms of photo renderings, in terms of support. We have, I would say, 3 to 5 times the scalability leveraging AI than we did before generative AI really showed up to the level that it is now. So that was just a trend that showed up. But we always had when you have a platform like this, there's all these different points that you can automate and simplify and add to that journey that make this a really fun kind of long-term scalable thing.
I loved you brought in. The product roadmap versus the tech debt that happens versus just managing the amount of user input and tickets, because you're two-sided multi-sided platform. When you've got multiple stakeholders, it'd be so great if it did this, so great if it did that, then all of a sudden AI shows up on the scene. So from a founder or from a team perspective, talk to us a little bit about the juggle. I think it's a juggling act of balancing. Okay, we've got these new technologies coming down the pipe that are going to make our life better, but that takes time. We've got customers of all shapes and sizes, of all sides of the platform, demanding different things, and we always, to a certain degree, have limited resources because there's only so much to. Even if you have the money, you still run out of time. How did you guys keep balance of that? And then AI knocks on the door.
Yeah, well, I think it's a common cultural, like internal cultural direction or inertia to do cool stuff as opposed to do what the customer truly values. And that's with any big technology change like AI is. It's easy to get distracted by the shiny bubbles and look at, holy shit, this thing can do that. And that was instant, and that used to take a month and a half of work, and now it's 5 seconds. Wow.
It's hard not to have your mind blown.
Yeah. So I think so you have to recognize that that's your natural inclination and really stay focused on what is actual value to the customer. How do I connect this to something useful to the customer as opposed to what's cool? And maybe one example for us is our support AI. So we call it Bōde, is the ability for, you got to take our model over the last 3 years, every question a customer asked us all the way through their journey, we created an article, we created video. So we have thousands of resources that we had previously created because we wanted that to just be available and searchable and easy for customers. We took this AI, which is on the open.ai platform, and plugged all of that information in. And then we also crawled regulatory, the whole regulation document by province, all the rules, all the contracts, all the data on our site, literally in a couple hours. And
it's so cool, man. It's so cool.
and this AI can now pass. We took 10 of the toughest questions on a realtor exam and asked all 10 questions of it, and it got all of them right. So it's effectively got the intelligence in the sense of understanding of how all this stuff works, market insights, any kind of question you could think about that's technical or otherwise throughout your journey. It now answers immediately 24/7. And that really is this intersection back to our previous discussion of that's now amazing convenience for customers. That's free for them any time of day or night. You have this whole inventory of information and a human level conversation with this AI. And for us, we can now stay very lean internally in terms of not having to double, triple staff weekends and evenings and offer a better service fundamentally. So that's one example where we just said, this is insane. And it's getting smarter every day, like at a scary pace. This is the worst it'll ever be. You know what I mean? And it's still pretty good. Yep. And it's only like tomorrow's better than learning at a pace that the rest of us, as the rest of us being humans, can't even pretend to keep up to. 100%. And so we're now in that spot of, that's
a great, very practical, and like as a user, it's just there. But to talk about just how simple, but how deliberate you were to create that, and then the customer value, customer experience.
Yeah, and it's a showcase of the way that we think, which is if you have this platform, now you have the intelligence at your hip at every step in the process versus if you're in the traditional mindset, the value is the person. Yep. So only a company like ours looking at the world the way that we do could imagine that being, a very powerful fit to the service. And so we're the first to do it in Canada, I think in North America, in fact, for real estate.
Oh, very cool. Okay, that's a nice little feather. I like that.
Yeah, well, the team's jacked about it. And obviously the possibilities are endless in terms of as it gets smarter about data and property values and all the sophistication of what happens in the transaction, all the insights around that and experience around that, because you can put it through thousands of transactions, where the traditional model is, a typical agent is doing 6 to 8 transactions a year. We're doing thousands now.
Supplementing that 20-year experience in 20 minutes. You made the comment earlier about what actually provides value to the customer. And I love like a tool like that. But I'm also, talk to me about, I'll stop putting my assumptions on the table when I ask the question. Talk to me about how you gather that information. You're not asking AI what the customer cares about. You've got humans going, okay, we could do these 10 different features. What is it? Is it polling? Is it conversations? Like where the rubber meets the road? Like how are you gathering that customer data so that you can make the right call on optimizing your product build?
Yeah, we've held to our principle that we started the company with, which is what we call customer centricity. Mm-hmm. So it's the continued realization that every decision we make in some way, directly or indirectly, impacts the customer. And they are at the absolute top of our priority, because like it's easy for us to get into our own echo chamber about all this cool stuff or things we think we should do. But the more difficult thing is to constantly sound and garner feedback and synthesize information from customers. So in our company's case, every month we do a full review of all builder feedback, all consumer feedback.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That we're receiving through surveys, through Bōde, like the interactions with AI. That's all, of course, trackable. So that helps us better understand what people are asking about, what refinements we can make, and then NPS scores on platform. So it's a triage of a number of different data sources where we have the entire company in a 2-hour session, and we go through every piece of feedback that we have and the insights from it. And then that turns into rolling it back into our prioritization scheme and making sure that, I think it's a key cultural thing, that everybody in the company is in that room, because that continues this philosophy and understanding that no matter how close or far away you feel to the customer in your particular role, what you're doing impacts the success and their value of our service. So that's a key part of it.
I love it. I love that is there an Amazon story, but there was always an empty chair kind of at the table? That was like, how would the customer feel? You're reminding me of that. So you're a good company on that one. It seemed to work out for Amazon. Reminding me of that. And
they're doing okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed to be. And will you guys go as far as like, I heard someone say, so now I'm catching myself saying, if you want to double click, because you might get a piece of feedback, you're like, okay, we think it means this. Like, will your team go so far as literally just reach out and have a conversation and like, hey, like that's a builder, we know them. This is feedback kind of makes sense, but let's dig a little bit deeper. Like, is it as kind of, because as much as technology, there still is the power of having a conversation. Like I like to balance out that it all still has a place at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. So with builders, we have set up every 3-month review of their business.
Nice.
All their metrics
from a customer success perspective. Yeah.
Number of transactions, how they're utilizing our data, how they're utilizing our photo rendering service. There's a bunch of parts of that package. Let's go through this at the executive level, fully understand it, with the punchline being, tell us what we can do better to help your success of the platform and leverage of the service. On the consumer side, I'll use one example. Yes, we absolutely do that. We have either our CS or marketing team call and do interviews with successful sellers, asking them basically, give us everything that you thought about this, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's all useful to us. We had a recent seller in Edmonton, $500,000 property, listed on the market for 24 hours, had an offer come in from a self-represented buyer at $5,000 over list and an agent-represented buyer in the same price range. And of course, the self-represented buyer is $15,000 less, or $10,000 to $15,000 less in cost to the seller. So that was all on platform. They negotiated, they closed the deal, and this is like our perfect example of what
Yeah,
we set out to do.
This is how we dreamed it would work, right? And you see it, like, that's like, I joke. Connor Curran from Local Laundries, he talks about the first time he saw his t-shirt out in the wild, just someone he didn't know wearing it. And he's like, it's what I wanted it to be, and that's the person I kind of wanted to be wearing it, even though I don't know them. So it's that transaction that you architected, and then when you see it happen, like it's like, oh, there we go. And it's good I like to celebrate those and call them out. Hey, just curious, and this is my pet peeve with friggin' real estate agents. Do I get to those two human beings, one who's selling, one buying, do they actually get to communicate? This whole wall that gets created and I'm going to communicate on your behalf, like, that's not how negotiation really happens in business. It drives me bananas. Personal venting there for a second. Like, so on your platform, and I've not transacted on your platform. I will whenever I put my house up, which my wife says is going to be never. So that's off the table. Do I actually get to communicate like with two human beings and actually have a real conversation with somebody who I want to buy a house from?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's
sorry. So maybe a weird question.
No, it's a common question actually. It's been interesting. So as a seller, of course, you're just listing your property fully online with all the tools that we've talked about. Buyers either have representation, so then the agent is interacting with the seller, or they're self-represented, which would be your example. And then the two decision makers are connecting directly. And what we find is, it's actually been interesting. Often those two people, when the transaction takes that form, often those two people actually become friends because they typically have a lot in common, right? They like that part of the city. So they're typically in a similar family dynamic. We're talking similar price range, what have you. They have a lot to talk about. And our sellers, this is surprising to me, but many sellers really like to sell their property and talk about the emotional aspect of why they love their house and why it's been great to them. So when you have that direct interaction, you have a totally different character of the sale versus those two people never meeting, don't even know each other's names until the contract shows up. So it's a much more kind of human and direct connection. And then because they're using the same data, there's just fewer opinions and fewer obscurements kind of in the mix. So that creates a easier kind of value discussion out of the gates.
It's interesting to me. It almost does, in a perfect scenario, what technology should do. It streamlines all the stuff that maybe stresses you out or you're unsure of, but allows you to actually interact with that other person on a very human level, while the other things that obviously it's a big transition need to get taken care of, but they are. So it allows you to just do the human part and let all the other stuff get taken care of and remove the fear and the I don't know and all the stuff that can come with why I'm like, oh, I have to get an agent because, whoa, my God, like what happens if this and that? But if the technology does that, I can just go talk to that other human being. I really like, that's my own interpretation. I'm like, that sounds better to me. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I like that model better.
Well, we're seeing, I don't know if you're tracking, but there's a number of class action lawsuits happening in the US and in Canada against the industry regulations.
I'm not tracking it, but I've heard whisper of it. Yeah. Or I've seen it pass by.
Which is basically illustrating what you just said, which is you want more they're basically saying we don't have, in the US, we don't have options. We don't feel like we actually have the choice of commission and how much we pay. We don't have the transparency and control, which is really what you're characterizing. And we should get compensated for this. We have a broken regulatory scheme and they're winning. There's been a number of settlements, billions of dollars have been paid. And the regulatory change that's expected to happen is the sell agent can no longer systemically offer the buy side commission in the system. So 5% transaction, that 2.5% that would typically be on offer, you can no longer do that. And then on the buy side, that's change number one. Change number two is on the buy side, you can not represent yourself as free to a buyer because fundamentally the seller is paying your bill. Your buyer is just writing the check in the first place.
Which contributes to the cost of the transaction for both sides.
Right. And
it's
a misunderstanding
it's misrepresented. Yeah.
How that all actually works. So now you have to, before you show your first property, the buyer and the buy side agent have to have a contract that shows this is the amount I'm going to get paid, whatever's on offer from the sell side, so that there's an understood $20, $30, $40,000 there, as opposed to this is free. I'm doing air quotes for those of you listening.
Yes, that's good to call that out because they were appropriately used. It's easy to misuse air quotes. I think you nailed it on that one.
So that ends up, that whole dynamic is, or those two changes have the potential to basically change the regulations to where our business started, which is it's actually free to buy. You have full transparency in the deal. You have much lower commissions. And then now you create a choice in the marketplace for people and homeowners and buyers of property, not only in the US, but also in Canada, where the same regulations are, or the same lawsuits are happening here, the same copycat thing, civil action is happening. So it's been really interesting to watch that change and that frustration coming from homeowners saying, this has got to change. We have to look at ways to make this better, more transparent, lower cost, more choice for the market.
Not to get into the history of why it works the way it works, but I also like to, was there a time when like this was the right way to solve the problem at the time, but it's just hung around for too long? You know, it's like a bad habit. Well, it seemed good when I started, but now that 20 years later, the smoking, it was a bad idea, or when it picked a bad habit. Is it like, can we give it the due respect of like, yeah, there was a time where we needed to build it this way. It needed to protect. It was a bit of a Wild West. We put this in, but now time has passed and the world has changed. Am I oversimplifying or am I giving too much credit?
No, I think you nailed it. And that really is, you know, when we look at it, we don't think agents are the problem. We think the market doesn't have enough choice for different styles of ways of doing business. So if you go back 40 years, when there was no digital network, you had the human agent network. So that was, how do you actually find buyers? Well, you're in the analog world, your bus benches, your lawn signs, and the seller.
Yeah, how big's your Rolodex, literally, right?
Right. And then they extended that. The sell agent would go out and find a buy side agent and say, I will hire you and I will pay you half my commission if you find a buyer. So that person is literally beating the streets, and that
which makes total sense at that time, right?
100%. And especially for, let's say, at 5% of a $80,000 house in the center of Calgary, which is now $700,000, right? Like that's, so it's the property growth has gone up 5, 6, 700% depending on where you are and property types in Canada. But that 5% has remained, all the while this digital transformation has happened. So I think that's really this misalignment and the gap we really want to fill to give people that option, because people are shopping online wherever they're doing that, whatever listing site they have, and we are the enablement of keeping it online all the way through the transaction on both sides. So I think that's just where we now are, and we'll also make our technology similar to what you're seeing with Uber and taxi cabs right now, where Uber's selling their technology to taxis. We'll also make our platform available to other brokerages. We have a number of active discussions.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yep.
A number of active discussions with them, because they say, well, I love this technology. You guys have created something really interesting. Can I buy it? Can I license it? I would like to be able to bring this to my clients. And our biggest picture is fully aligned with that. And our initial business case had that in it of, can we, raise the tide of transparency, ease, and making that transaction much more modern and simple, no matter what customer experience you as a homeowner really want.
Personally, talked about like e-commerce and online transactions, but we're really talking about is personalization. That phone has put so much power into our individual, I want what I want, how I want it, when I want it. And that is not like that horse is well out of the barn and not going back in anytime. I'm going to quote Amazon. So I saw someone sent me a Bezos clip the other day, and it was it was just a 10-minute little thing. And I watched him on stage somewhere doing whatever. Not saying I'm a fan or not a fan, but you have to be in awe of what was created. He said, stop trying to create a business for what's going to change, build it on what's going to stay the same, and then use technology to enable that. And I was like, that is a cool flip in terms of like, people want personalization. People want transparency. Oh, but I don't want technology. I want technology to enable the things I need to live my life the way I want. And I think that's such a good representation of what you guys are doing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have with the recognition of all that, how many apps do you have on your phone? I don't even know the number I have, hundreds.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with a bunch for sure. 100%.
And
some of them I even use, Rob. Some of them I even use.
and so there you go. But you still have that customization, that personalization. And I think you have, as a result, as any business building tech, you have a big challenge to attract attention from people, right? It's so easy to flip around and do all these things, within the same minute, let alone the same day. So how do you create a really attractive, notable, valuable service? It takes a lot to do that because the modern user is bouncing around between 20 different apps every day and is now been conditioned for it to be, if this isn't really slick and really easy, I just won't use it, or I'll download the next one or what have you. So the benchmark of ease and performance of that app is now so high. You got to be really, really good to win.
It's the customer centricity around what experience that I have. Like, your brand isn't what you tell people; it's the experience they have when they interact with you. That, like, I get into that debate. No, it's my logo. I'm like, oh no, it is far from that. It's the experience you have. Looking back, even Uber, how most of us heard about Uber was from a friend who used it. It wasn't from some big expensive ad campaign they did. They actually did very little of that in the early days. It was like, holy shit, this is better. Done. I can get out of the car and walk away. I don't have to deal with the taxi driver giving me a hard time because I don't have $100 of cash in my pocket to pay him, and he has to fumble with his machine. Like, Uber instantly was a better experience at the time, right? If we all remember back.
100%.
How have you dealt with, and this is you could say that's not the case, but there has to have been a few haters along the way, because you're disrupting, you're changing. And there's a lot of people that system works well for them. They've built a business around it. And there's I've transacted a handful of homes, had really good realtor experiences, have a lot of friends who've had not so good experiences. So ripe for disruption, but has the haters been part of the, hey, yeah, we're doing something different? Like, talk to me a little bit just how you manage that, because you waded into a territory that probably a few people didn't want you in. I'm guessing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob.
I will not correct you. It's a question I commonly get. Like, make sure you keep your home address confidential. Is
your house egged recently?
There's an RV.
I hope not.
Yeah, no, well, I think it's been interesting. It's been a blend. So I would say, you'd say broadly in thirds, 1/3 of agents are very, very angry and hostile. 1/3 are fine with it. They interact with us all the time. We have something like 3,000 agent accounts on platform across our markets. Some agents actually have sold their own properties with us because they love the platform. Others use our market data. Others are representing buyers in the examples we were talking about before. So they're making offers on platform, and they're working into the ecosystem. And then the other third have basically said, I want to buy your technology, or are you hiring? Because I knew this modernization had to happen, and I see that you're doing it. I would love to be part of it in some way. So I think that's been the blend. And if you take which
is kind of human adoption, like that's just the technology curve, like the adoption, like you could almost break it out into that pattern, right?
Yeah, I think so. Like the adoption curve, as you say. I think, you look at, in Canada, we have 120,000 agents. In the US, 1.5 million. There's a lot of agents. And a big part of what's happened there is, I would say, 10 to 20% are doing 80 to 90% of the transactions. Yeah. So your experience as you're describing it, I'm sure you had people that are doing this full time. They've got a team. They've invested in creating as good of experience as they can. But then there's a whole bunch of other agents that do this on the side as a way to pick up a pretty large check every once in a while. Yeah. And that's the other 70, 80%. So I think more of those guys fall into the first third that I was talking about, of like, you can't do this, you're not allowed to do this, whatever. And we quickly remind them, we're regulated, we're licensed, we adhere to all standards that you do. So I think that's what's going to happen over time as more and more technology is available, not only direct to consumer, but also to the best agents and brokerages. there's going to be some consolidation of the total number of agents, but the overall
That makes sense.
elevation of the service will happen, and the diversification of options as a result of that will be a much better marketplace than we've had over the last 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of following that pattern. And I had someone on yesterday. She is global consultant for digital transformation, and she talked about where we're getting it wrong is we often forget just the humans involved. And she kind of talked about digital transformation for a lot of people. It's kind of the 4 stages of grief. There's like a denial phase. There's a resentment phase. There's a like, okay, this might be better. Then there's the get on board. She kind of explained it that way. I just never heard it broken down. And she goes, yeah, people go through their stages of grief, and they either come to terms with it or they don't, and they move on. It's just how it goes. but it's going to happen, or else you as an organization will not be viable. What's the recent stat? I think it was Accenture. Somebody was 45% of polled CEOs believe that their companies without significant change won't be around in 10 years. Insert digital transformation right under that comment, right? I think it applies to all of us, whether we like it or not. So we might as well like it, in my opinion.
Well, in the broadest sense of Canadian productivity, if we're not applying AI, we're going to lose on a global stage. And Mark Cuban famously just came out saying, I'm not investing in any companies that don't in some way apply AI to their operations or their customer service. So I just think that's where you have no choice but to adopt the power of that technology, because otherwise somebody else with a much lower cost structure can quite easily surpass you. So I do think over time, that's what I'm really excited about, is coming back to the customer actually changes industries. It's not you, the business. It's the customer that says, that makes sense. This is what I wanted. And now everybody responds to that, as opposed to, it's the business that is driving the customer to that end. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just where we're at in a what's a lagging adoption of technology sector in real estate.
Which hence is where the opportunity sits as an entrepreneur, for sure, to come in and go, hey, guess what? I see some opportunity here. Talk to me a little bit about going back to my memory of our last conversation around the approach you took with, we're not going to bootstrap this. We're not going to try and make, 3 people do 12 people's jobs. We're going to hire people with backgrounds. We're going to, skill up a little bit, almost maybe sooner than you should or would. Should is a loose term. Maybe than is typical. How's that played out for you in terms of like looking back? Oh, yeah, that absolutely. And I would double down on it if I could do it again.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's been very positive. I really liked having the board in from day one, as opposed to needing to build out that team, amidst all the operational complexities you have when you're a brand new company. So I think that's worked really well. I think one thing that I've learned is for a company like ours, it's true of all companies, but I think especially with technology businesses, every 6 months you have different needs. You're going through a reorganization. You're saying, I actually need these skills now. These other skills are getting adjusted over here. So it's good for founders to know that is the norm, as opposed to feeling like, well, we got to...
Am I the only one this is happening to? Which sometimes you can feel that way as an owner, right? Or founder.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, passion behind the business and everything that you've built. And in our case, of course, launching during COVID is another level of uncertainty and historical market fluctuations. All kinds of stuff, people having babies, like new families. There's
life is messy, Rob. Life is messy. It is messy.
So I think that's something where, when you have a board, you have the conversation with them. They're very quick to say, oh yeah, this is, don't feel like this transition is awkward in some way or not necessary or not required. This is the norm. The norm is, you're going to have changes on your executive team. You're going to have different skills and different needs. And the key is to always put the company and its success first, in the sense of what is our strategy, and then the people that you need in order to support that near-term execution of that strategy is rapidly evolving. So you have to remain flexible on that front and make sure that the skills align with that plan. So I think that's been a big learning for me. Obviously, I've been through many reorganizations in my life. I'm sure you have as well. But the speed of which that needs to happen is quite different when you're building a new company.
Yeah, well, at that 6-month timeline, it feels like the dust has barely settled since the last time, and here we are again, right? That can beat people up just in terms of that pace. And
Exactly.
have you found, I'm not digging into the secret files here, but have you been able to focus on, hey, we've got the right people, now let's get them more skills? Or has it been a combination of like, yeah, okay, these are the right people, but this skill, they're not going to get there and we need it. So therefore we've got to make a change. Like that balancing of up and out versus up and in from a human resources or human capital perspective. And do I bring someone who's already got the 10 years experience, or do I take someone that already has the right values and I trust and is aligned with who we are and invest to get them the skills? And how do you juggle? How have you been juggled that balance? Because it's not a one or the other, I don't think.
No, yeah, I think the focus has to be what skills are required for that job, and then we'll do everything possible to with good people that are working hard and contributing to the business and the team, everything possible to help them get that skill. And then if that doesn't align for whatever reason, then you're saying where does their skill set fit in the rest of the company? That's the next check. Can we make that can we find the right alignments somewhere else in the business? And we've done that a number of times successfully with us, because to me, the goal is to keep the best people for as long as possible. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes they say, I want to do, my career is going this way and this reorg means we're going this way. And then I have the philosophy of when we're doing 6-month reviews or doing 360s, I'm always asking the question, what do you want to do in your career beyond Bōde? Like what does this look like 5, 10, 20 years out? Let me help you in my capacity get to that goal. And if that aligns with Bōde as long as possible, fantastic. If it doesn't, how can I help down the road? How can I help beyond our company? Because I think that's the ultimate goal of mentorship.
Rather than the old culture of like getting offended and being taken personally versus like, this is the journey. We're going to be on it together for a while. Maybe we'll be on it again down the road. Like there's that alumni approach of circling back. And it just feels like such a better, healthier way, but not always has been the way.
Yeah. We're competing for resources. At the end of the day, how are we're competing in the market, we're competing for capital, and we're competing for human resources and finding the best people. And so how do you create an environment that's really attractive to bring in the absolute best people? That's one of, if not the biggest challenge you have. And if you can do that really well, you've got, coming back to your question of like productivity and how that all works, especially with AI. If you have people that are really excited about adopting this technology and finding ways to do things faster and better, that's a huge point of survival and, both surviving and thriving to consider when you're hiring these days. Like that's a new skill that is, I would say, now prominent in the last year, where in the past that wasn't a huge part of the question. Now it's a key part of what is important in that role.
And in those early days, it's almost not what you know about AI, but how are you legit? Because if you're curious about it, you'll learn, right? There's that curiosity that it takes versus like, oh, I'm terrified versus like, holy shit, this is neat. Do you know what I did last night at 2 a.m? Because I couldn't stop, and I've had a few of those kind of conversations with people. They're like, every time you see it show you something new, you want to go a little bit farther. It's almost like a video game in itself. But from an employer branding perspective, like I appreciate like talking to you and obviously being the leader, founder, so much of what you believe shows up in your team. Is there anything like from other founders listening, that you've done deliberately to be favorable? So when people like, it's not what you tell me Bōde is like, it's when I ask someone who works there and goes, what's it like working over there? What they say next, that's kind of your culture. What have you done deliberately, or what advice can you even give out or give your younger self on how to be really deliberate about that?
I think it's, the number one thing is, do we all believe in our purpose? You have a really clear purpose at the business and a passion for that purpose. And a recognition that this is fucking hard. Yeah, you
Thank you for
have,
saying that, man. Thanks for putting it out there.
like, not just myself, but anybody coming in. This is fully transparent. Everybody's in the limelight. This is high pressure. If you're not attracted to that pressure that aligns with that purpose and pushing through walls and changing industries, uh, yeah, it's just not the right place for you. So I think having that conversation up front in the hiring process, like, how excited are you about our purpose? Because that is what is going to drive everything. And then you need to be competitive with everything, of course, around that, coming back to competition for resources, of course, compensation and benefits and equity and the like. But I think it's been really interesting to see the people that really believe in our purpose. I can't I can't force these people to take vacations. They're working weekends, they're working nights, and this isn't me pushing them. This is them with that intrinsic motivation,
self-selecting,
self push,
yeah,
because they're that aligned with the passion of the business. And that's also what makes it the most fun, because when you win towards and you're progressing towards that purpose and that long-term goal, there's nothing more fun in business. I'm convinced, or at least not for me. So I would just continue to focus on that absolute driver, that success, and then everything else falls in behind that.
Man, celebrating those wins. Yeah, no, I love it. And there's definitely a theme when I talk to the founders that are doing the thing and successfully building it. There is a thread that starts to come through that, we're all unique, but yet share common characteristics. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about, and I'm on your site right now in the logged in, checking out the data section on like what's going on. What are you seeing happen across the country? Any perspective on, not that you're a real estate expert just because you write in this platform, but what are you seeing? Because, Alberta's hot, Ontario was cooler for a bit. What BC, any crystal ball or any just kind of perspective of what you're seeing through like 1,600 transactions? You get a point of view.
Yeah. We, very interestingly, we started the company when Calgary/Alberta was cold by historical standards.
Yeah.
And Toronto and Vancouver on a 20-year bull run. And fast forward to today, whatever, 3 to 4 years later, that's inverted. So we now have Calgary, Alberta is leading the country, but specifically Calgary, and most specifically apartments. So that affordable or small townhome, that affordable, call it $300,000 to $500,000 property, is the absolute hottest asset in Canada by far. So that's been really interesting to watch. And then like any market that's been hot for a long time, changing, Vancouver and Toronto have fallen down into what we would call balanced market conditions.
Okay.
For them, it feels like the sky is falling, but in reality, the actual data is this is a normal supply demand kind of environment.
We get so addicted to those up markets and convince ourselves that that's the way it should always be. It's just not it's not realistic. Even if you look at historical real estate values over time, like you're right. It gets so outpaced and then everything starts to adjust to that. Like it's going to never change. God, we're so silly as humans sometimes. We can't help ourselves.
Yeah. It's the recency bias. And so that
totally,
but that's why this data is so important. Forget the media cycles, forget the opinions of people. The market actually functions with data. It is a supply and demand driven efficient marketplace. So if you have the information, then you can make smart decisions on values and investments and the various decisions you can make. I would say overall inflation, and we're seeing this as a big part of our scaling, just overall inflation of insurance, of mortgages, of everything in our lives, but also specifically around home ownership, has now just gotten more expensive.
Yeah.
So where in the past or last time you and I were talking, it would be, we found people more saying, I want to use this platform. And now it's more, I need to preserve
interesting. Okay.
as much of my equity as possible, especially as taxes on capital gains are going up. You add up all those factors. Income is not growing at the speed of inflation, of course, for Canadians. So that need is now clear. The cost of selling your property being 90% of your transaction costs, over above legal bills and everything else, it is in the transaction and commission. So this is now a totally different level of focus and requirement for homeowners preserving that home equity.
The motivation increase of like preference. Oh, I prefer it. I like to do it this way versus this is a better financial way of doing it. That's a sweet spot to be in where you get a little push pull, kind of going back and forth.
Absolutely.
So with that, obviously interest rates coming down a little bit, shortage across Canada. We've got more people than we have houses. What's the next steps for you guys? Because you said earlier, Alberta, BC, Ontario, other markets. Like give us a peek at the roadmap.
Yeah, we're going to continue to expand in Canada where customers want us. So we're keeping very close track of people in other provinces where we're not, saying I would love to be able to sell my property. And so wherever the biggest density of that is where we'll go next. And then we do have the next 12 to 18 months goal of expanding also into the United States, where they have very similar market dynamics as we do. They have multiple agents, similar number of agents per capita, state level regulations, contracts, all of that. So we've designed our platform in a way where we can, kind of oversimplifying it, but a state looks a lot like a province to us.
My brain was always like, I can see that, right? And totally, yeah, that makes sense. And each state down there is more almost like its own country or its own jurisdiction, and then you district, and it can break down even more. Right?
Yeah, California is the size of Canada on this topic, so right.
Just for perspective, everyone. Yeah, I know, totally.
So that's geographically, that's our goal, and then we'll be taking the data that you're looking at right now up. We'll be putting that into version 2, version 3, version 4, leveraging AI and metadata. So data insights are about to get even more exciting on that front. And then wherever we can automate the platform or product experience, we will continue to do that through automated listings, for example, and providing much more insight throughout the transaction in terms of what's going on in Altador in your community or by property type, and those kinds of understandings of what is normal, what is the market doing, to make it even easier and more understandable for buyers and sellers of property.
Yeah, it's just the more data you have, and obviously the implementation of AI, the beginning to pull insights out of that and pull, okay, so therefore this means this. That's where it starts to get really exciting. And from a user's perspective, that seems so simple, but I appreciate how much needs to go on behind the scenes to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just tell me what I want to know. It should be obvious. Like, just tell me. I want to know. Where are you guys at? I know you've specifically, startup to scale up. But where are you kind of in your raise or your investment cycle? Have you guys done your student? And I apologize, I should probably know this. Where are you at? Kind of, if we were going to use formal terms in terms of your journey, Series A, moving to B, like what's that look like?
Yeah, we just announced our we call it large seed financing led by Finnair Labs, and James Lockery. James Lockery has joined our board, which is fantastic. That really is a blend of multiple VCs, and home builders are also participating, as well as family offices. So that, going back to the last time we talked and market cycles on the capital side, if this was 2022 and we raised $4 million with our revenue and our growth, you would just call it a Series A.
Okay.
But in this case, with everything going on in the market, that's a seed. So that gives us what we need in order to continue to progress everything we've been talking about over the next couple of years.
Fabulous. Well, and that's such a great group. I love what James is doing, and Finnair, and there's so many good stories here in town that I'm bullish on. I tend to be very bullish on Calgary overall, and because of stories like this and getting the investment, and it is so one degree of separate. Everybody knows everybody here. It's such a small town for all the right ways. A small town can mean other things. I tend to choose for positive. Biggest small town ever, which is Calgary, Alberta, but Calgary for sure.
Yeah,
very cool.
And I think James. I was just going to make the comment that Finnair Labs, I think, is one of the true venture funds we have in Canada. Whatever they only invest in companies that they think can 100x their investment and grow to that,
and have a positive impacts on their
and
worlds,
have a big impact, exactly. And then they have all the services on their team to support it. So we need more funds like that in Canada. That's really the American recipe, or the U.S. investment per year is the next 9 countries combined in venture capital. So they're just so far ahead.
Slightly more mature market for that, right? Yeah, totally.
But there's a great example with Thin Air of the American model, and James is well versed.
Oh, that's cool. I've never heard it explained that way. That's cool. I get it. Yeah.
And so hopefully that continues to, their success and our success continues to spawn more bold, early aggressive investment, because I think that's a huge part of obviously what founders need. And it has to work both ways. Of course, the founders need to deliver on their goals and what's required there. So that partnership and the blend will both be required in order to affect that change. But I think that's an important ingredient in the ecosystem.
It certainly seems from some of the conversation I've had where some of the later stage, more mature money is really starting to look at that area, because that's where there's a lot of the early stage ventures where there's a lot of opportunity. So it feels like there's, every time I turn around, someone's starting a new early stage fund. And I think that's great, because if you don't incubate there, we're never going to get the big PE opportunities. But it definitely seems like there's a bit of a wave kind of heading into that space to go, hey, I think there's upside here. Let's go play there. Which, from the first conversations I had on this podcast years ago, like, we need more money to get more startups off the ground like that. I think it was Jim Gibson, we're 10 years late to a 20-year plan, and we've got this many startups. We need to quadruple it, and we're only going to do that with money. So we'll get there. We're still early, and I had Brian de Lottenville from Benevity on the other day, just kind of getting his perspective of where they were X amount of years ago versus their journey, and just talking about the quote unquote the Calgary tech ecosystem, and how we're still young. We still got a long way to go, but still a good ride to be on. And then stories like yours are making it true, right?
Loads of talent here and an amazing community of support. I think we have the founder talent. We have I'm talking investors, of course, across Canada and the US all the time. And the Canadian investors all say Montreal, Toronto, and Calgary are the 3 cities that we have founders that have that push. They have that grind, the boldness behind it, the energy, kind of the intangible thrust of entrepreneurship, so to speak, is representative in those 3 cities. And I hear that kind of across the board. So cool that the rest of the country and also US is starting to really see Calgary in that light. Of course, we're much earlier than Toronto and Montreal
but you're getting on you're getting on the ballot, right? You're getting your names there. And was that the case when 5 years ago? I don't think it was, but no. Is that kind of also like we're seeing a positive shift in that direction? It wasn't, and now it is, right?
That's my feel. And
I've heard that from a few other people. So I'm fact checking qualitatively, but still fact checking all the same. No, it's people like, oh yeah, they used to fly over Toronto to go to Vancouver. Now they're flying and stopping in Calgary. Like, it's changing where the money's moving around, and so many. Again, you hear it enough times, it starts to feel like a theme, which is great. and I speaking of cognitive bias, I like to fill myself full of really positive views of Calgary as well. I'm very receptive to it, Rob.
I'll share that with you as well. We're a good tandem on that front.
Well, if we don't believe in ourselves, no one else is going to, right? Step
That's
one.
Right.
Rob, thanks for coming on, man. That was a fantastic chat. Really good to catch up, and we went down a few rabbit holes. Thanks for going on the journey and being willing to whatever question. And congrats, and not even want to say good luck, because that sounds silly. Congrats on what you've built and what you're continuing to build. And happy to have you on. And I'll see you in 2 years, maybe sooner. We'll talk again.
Yeah, sounds great. And
hey, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, do you have a preferred? Are you a LinkedIn guy? And based on you got a good chunk of followers. I would say you're probably a LinkedIn guy.
I spend a little time on there. Yep. So hit me up on LinkedIn. Of course, our website is Bōde.ca if you want to check out our platform. And I also just wanted to say Collisions is an important part of this journey for founders. So what you're doing is,
thank you.
And it's super important. Open communication on how the world's working and success stories and learning for Alberta. So congrats on all your success with the pod, because it's, like I say, very important to the ecosystem and to getting this young tech community really thriving.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the feedback. It's been a hell of a journey. It started off as just hey, this will be fun. 500 episodes later, it was. It is. All right, man. Thanks so much for the chat. We'll chat soon.
Cheers. Bye.